Hey everyone, and welcome to this episode of New Earth Podcast. We have with us today a wonderful guest, Sharon King, who's a long-time friend as well. We've known each other for many, many years. And Sharon is an international trainer, an author, and she's here today to talk about heal your birth, heal your life. So I'm just going to hand over to Sharon, and perhaps you can just introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about your background to start with, Sharon, and how you came to be doing this wonderful work.
Well, thank you, Sarah. And actually, coming to a workshop that you were helping out on, Kaimi's workshop, was like one of the instrumental parts of why I'm doing this work. But in 2007, I discovered EFT. I'd been doing holistic therapies for many, many years and decided that, like massage, reflexology, aromatherapy, and although they're all really good modalities, I knew that I was searching for something else. So when I discovered EFT in 2007, it was like, oh my God, this is so amazing, working on the energy psychology side of things. And just the 3 days experience that I had, seeing people, transforming physical issues, emotional issues, mental issues, I just knew that this is what it was that I was looking for. I then discovered Matrix Reimprinting, and developed by Carl Dawson, and he was my EFT trainer as well. And just love the whole concept of blending like inner child work with EFT. So if anybody doesn't know of EFT, it's the tapping. Is that also known as tapping, where you tap on the meridian system? So I don't know how far you want me to go back, but my own birth experience was kind of like the start of this whole process of really getting into the specializing, if you like, into the birth side of it, because the modality I use, you can use on any trauma, whether it's past life trauma, ancestral trauma, the here and now trauma, childhood trauma, babyhood trauma, in utero trauma. It's so versatile.
So my understanding was that you took the Matrix Reimprinting, is that what it's called? And then
Yes.
you created your own kind of, you took it further and created your own version, specializing on the birth experience and how to heal that for both the mother and the baby. Is that correct, Sharon?
That's fair to say. I created Matrix, what was called Matrix Birth Reimprinting, within using the Matrix Reimprinting tools, but specialized in the in utero and birth part. But also what was coming in, because I kind of count myself as being like very spiritual as a child. I was very connected to nature, to animals, not so much humans, but I feel like, I could see dead people, for like in that film, I can see dead people. But anyway, so there was a big learning around that, and I was always like really fascinated with the spiritual side of things. So I grew up reading Doris Stoke books. If anybody knows Doris Stoke, she was an amazing medium who wrote hundreds of books. I devoured those. So within working in utero with people, quite often, if we get back to conception and the energy of what we're dealing with is still there, it is either something that we're tapping into that belongs to our ancestors, or it's something that's happening from past life, other lifetimes, working through us as well. So I kind of like see us all being a big mix of past life stuff, life purpose. What did we come here for? What was the prime directive, if you like? What was our mission? Why did we come here? So really going into those areas, I developed something called the light matrix technique, where I take people back into what some people would call soul space, or the space where we come from. I like to just think of it as another dimension. And this is where all the higher frequency beings hang out, all the angels, archangels, our guides, people who have passed over and gone into the light. So I kind of was teaching both. I was like doing the very grounded, earthy, coming to, conception, in utero birth, the first year of life. That was my main focus for people, getting them a nice solid foundation. and then branching off, maybe going into the light matrix, exploring past lives, having a safe space to bring all the ancestors in to do the ancestral clearing, chatting with our guides, talking to them to find out, well, what did we actually sign up for when we came here? And so I guide people how to do that, to connect with their guides. And then just over the last couple of years, I've started to incorporate the concept of what was it called? Mindscape. Where you build this workshop in your mind.
That's a body talk technique, which is how Sharon and I first met. I was organising some classes, some body talk classes, which is also energy medicine healing, and the Mindskip technique is a part of that, as a way for manifestation and all kinds of things. So sorry to interrupt you.
That's all right, that's no problem. So I'm bringing those concepts in, where we have a healing room and we have a library, and we can, all of the stuff in your imagination, if you like, is, we can do so much good work when we're just there in that space. But it was actually, I never forget this moment when I'm sat on Kaimi's course. It was the module 3 around consciousness. And I hadn't actually worked with somebody who was pregnant at that time. And Kaimi was talking about how our senses are either developed or not lost, but affected by our birth experience. So if we have a very good birth experience, a very good bonding experience, then we're safe to develop our sense of sight, our hearing, our body touch. If you have a lot of pain, a lot of trauma during your birth experience, then that, can affect your putting the silver nitrate drops in the eyes. I think that's what he was talking about, and how that blurs the vision of the baby, and affects the bonding, interrupts the bonding process. So just something as simple as that can develop problems with eyesight.
It's incredibly powerful. So, I mean, I love how you're bringing all these different aspects together, because it's so interrelated, from the ancestral past life, right the way through, because the ancestral energy from a Chinese medicine point of view, it's the inherited energy, and it's our, it relates to our kidney chi, which is, what rules the reproductive system. So they're so interlinked, from a Chinese medicine point of view. So let's start, right the way back with the ancestral, because my understanding is that, if there is a corruption of the DNA, the epigenetics, which is that corruption of the DNA that can then be passed down, through our ancestral line. Often it skips a few generations. I think 3 to 5 generations is the norm. That's then inherited. So if a child, for example, was in an abusive family situation and, had that kind of trauma that led to high anxiety, that anxiety then can be, passed on, say 3 generations down. And the problem that happens then is the individual doesn't know where that anxiety's come from. So I'd be really interested to see how you work to undo that with that. Because the beauty about epigenetics is it sits on top of the DNA, so therefore it can be reversed.
So I have, okay, so this is sometimes a little bit difficult concept for people to understand, but I'm going to try and make it as simple as I can. Quite often there's a very strong link between us and our maternal grandmother, so our mother's mother. So the egg part of us was developed inside our mum when she was a baby, inside her grandmother. So if your grandmother, depending on your age, for me, my grandmother would have been kind of going through the war situation. She was driving an ambulance, with bombs dropping in London and things like this. So when my grandmother was pregnant with my mother, the egg side of me was being developed inside my mum. So that genetic imprint of everything my grandmother went through on that side of the family has been quite strongly imprinted into me and my own eggs. If I was to have a child, then obviously that just passes on and passes on. I quite like, because I'm an Aquarius, I quite like the scientific study side of things. So one of the studies that really fascinated me was the one that they did with mice and cherry blossom. I don't know whether you know this study, you probably do.
It sounds familiar. I'm Cancerian, so I don't, all the scientific stuff. It kind of I hear it and you remind
Okay.
me, but it doesn't stick.
That's all right, no worries. So this is showing you from the father side as well. So it's not just the mother side that we inherit stuff, it's the father side. So what they did is they got an adult male mouse. They put the smell of cherry blossom into the cage with the mouse. And every time they squirted the scent in there, they gave the mouse an electric shock.
Right.
Right. So then the mouse learned every time we smell cherry blossom, we're going to experience pain. All right. And then they allowed that mouse to mate with female mice. And what they discovered is that if they put the cherry blossom smell into the babies, when the babies were bigger, they put the cherry blossom in, they all recoiled. They all had that genetic imprint, remembrance, even though it's their father's remembrance, that this smell is associated with pain. And you can actually, I mean, I don't agree with animal experiments, but it's done. You could actually see the parts of the brain that had been affected by the experience that the father had. So to bring that into human terms, I worked with a guy who had PTSD, and he was adopted, and he knew nothing about his parents, nothing at all. And he'd been working a lot during his lifetime trying to clear the PTSD. And we had gone through, me and him together had gone through most of the conscious memories he had, but the PTSD was still very present within his system and the way he was reacting to the world. So what happened during one session is that we went back to conception, and we went back to that point just before conception, and he tuned into the frequency of the sperm.
Wow.
And what he was able to pick up was that his father had PTSD, and also by talking to the sperm, I know it sounds crazy, but whether he downloaded the information, but he believed he was talking to the sperm, and also that his father had been in the Vietnam War. So this is where the father got the PTSD from. And once we worked with the sperm to clear the PTSD, shock, trauma, energy from the sperm, and then we kind of went and did the conception in a loving, beautiful way, his PTSD went away.
Yay. That's so incredible. I just love this kind of stuff. I mean, it's amazing, isn't it? You know, what you can be led to as well. You know, I work with this kind of work as well, and it's just quite amazing. I'd like to touch on a little bit more about that influence of the environment and the stress that the parents have, you know, in the conception period, and how that can affect. And I think particularly during the you know, the emotional side, because you have during the third to sixth trimester, you have the limbic brain, the emotional brain developing. So, you know, any stress, emotions that are going on during that part, when there's the formation of the you know, of the limbic system, can really affect. So I just wonder if you can elaborate on that a little bit more, Sharon.
Absolutely. So the first trimester, the reptilian brain's being developed. So the reptilian brain controls our survival, all our basic needs. It's our basic fight, flight, freeze, our body systems. So in that first for the 3 months, the only part of the brain that can be affected by, let's just say, the most common trauma for babies in that first 3 months is around about the 6 to 8 weeks when mum discovers she's pregnant. All right. And I just want to pause here for a moment. Any parents that are listening to me talk here, do not go into blame and beating yourself up, and you were doing the best you could with the knowledge and understanding you had at the time, which is my favorite slogan. That's what I like to tell people. So a lot of women get pregnant and they don't plan the pregnancy. They don't want you know, they don't even think about wanting a baby, or they may think, no, I never want children, or this is the wrong time for me, and they may consider termination, adoption, and just go through a little process of like, wow, do I really want to be a mum? Can I be a mum? Even women who really want to have a child can go into, oh my God, how's this going to affect my life? Sends the father into, okay, can we afford this? Can I support the
Yes.
parents? So that will go into the brainstem. That will go into your fight, flight, freeze response. It will go into that part of the brain, and there will be this unconscious feeling of not being wanted. And if really going down the termination part of it, it can be a life-threatening situation for the baby. So baby in utero, it might be good to explain, babies perceive the outside world through the perceptions of their mothers. So the thoughts, feelings, emotions of mum are recorded by the baby. The baby can't separate itself from mum's thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And everything that's happening to mum is happening to baby in the first person. It's like they can't say, oh, mum's just had a car accident, that's mum's accident, and she's feeling fear or shock or blah, blah, blah. The baby will go shock, trauma, you know. So then potentially the life threat kind of moves on, and we get into the second trimester. Again, any event that mum goes through during the second trimester when the emotional brain is starting to be developed can have an influence on the baby. So if mum's feeling love, she does a yoga or a meditation, her whatever practice makes her feel good, walking in nature, she loves her job, she's in a very safe relationship, she's happy. Of course, none of us are like that all the time, but the majority of the time, the emotional brain will go into feeling safe, feeling secure, and will start to really integrate with the reptilian brain. So that's when all of this integration starts happening. And then in the third trimester, we have our cognitive brain, our cortex and neocortex being developed. So there's like any event that happens in the third trimester has 3 parts of the brain to affect. So
Yes.
it's just fascinating when you get into that. And then you have the birth experience. And then in afterbirth, that's when the 4th part of our brain, our prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for compassion, for connection, for love, for empathy, that's when that part of the brain, so the first year of the baby's life, the energy goes into developing this 4th part, which is our higher mind, if you like. It's the center, it brings everything together in the brain.
It's fascinating stuff. What's coming up for me as well, just to add to that, is you know, during that second trimester, the limbic brain is developing, and it's the time when often mums will start to show. And, you know,
Yes.
that can bring up a lot of emotion for dad, you know, and for mum as the body starts to change, you know, so that's kind of quite an important,
Yes.
you know, that can imprint a lot of stuff as well. I'd like to move into, you know, the birth and the importance of natural birth, because I know that's something that you talk about. And I'd also like to add, because I love that you added earlier, you know, about, you know, if people haven't had this experience, you know, if they did have a stressful pregnancy for whatever reason, because life is stressful, you know, to not feel guilty, because, you know, and I'd like to draw on my own personal experience for this, because I had 2 cesareans myself. I had a natural birth, my first birth, and I lost my baby at birth. So, you know, if the doctor's going to say to me, you know, and I'm getting close to birth and my baby's still transverse or breech, having done lots of energy work, you know, I believe that that's my life experience, that I'm meant to have cesareans for those babies. And I think that this is something that's also really important to talk about, because, you know, I do believe that every person does have their life journey, and much as we might try to have a peaceful, stress-free pregnancy or birth or whatever it is, life happens, and at the end of the day, that's part of our healing. I remember someone said to me, when I was going to have my first cesarean, that a cesarean can be a spiritual experience, and I actually really believe in that, because it was actually part of my life journey, even though that was quite difficult at the time. So I just wondered if you could speak to both the natural birth, but also that aspect of people having their life experience, and that's okay as well.
Absolutely. I could speak for hours about all of that. And there's some great stories in my book as well. So can I just Heal Your Birth, Heal Your Life is full of case studies and the technique that I use and the scientific backup to everything that's done. So it's such an incredible birth, is such an incredible time. And you're talking from your point of view as being a mother giving birth and having a cesarean experience, but it's more, for me, it's more about the baby, because the baby comes with its own soul purpose. It comes, I'll share my own birth experience in a minute, but how we're born really affects us. The struggle that we have to get here, or the ease that we have to get here, is very important. That if you believe in astrology, which I do very much, the time of birth, the place of birth, everything is kind of, I don't want to say preordained, but it kind of is for the soul growth of the mother and the soul growth of the baby. So my own birth experience is what I like to share, because this is where I believe that this all started. My mum, when I was in utero, I felt like I was in a toxic womb. So she smoked, and she also, when she had morning sickness, she also drank cider, because it was the only fluid she could keep down. Right, cider and twiglets. So if you know anybody's in the UK, you'll know twiglets. So they're like little wheaty sticks that are covered in Marmite or Vegemite if you're in Australia. So so I didn't have a very good diet when I was in utero, and neither did my mum. But anyway, so it came to my birth time, and it was like, okay, so when I tune into my baby self, I can see she's ready. It's like, yeah, it's time to get out of here. So as my mum went into labor, my dad took her to the hospital, dropped her off at the hospital because he wasn't allowed to stay. And the midwife kind of put her on the bed, examined her, and said to her, the baby's coming too quick. We need to slow the birth process down. And this is mum's her story she was telling me. So they gave her a hit of pethidine. They gave her gas and air and pethidine. Now my mum is very sensitive to drugs and alcohol. So when they gave her the pethidine, which is a narcotic drug, it knocked her out. She went to sleep. Okay. Yeah. So there I am, all eager to come and get the hell out of this space, this womb space. And yeah, I've decided to come, I'm coming out. And then all of a sudden, doof, oh my goodness. Mum goes off to sleep. I get hit with the narcotic drug as well. So I have a little snooze, and then it's okay, so I'm coming round. I've got to get myself out of here. And I'm doing this on my own now. Yes, mum's body's helping me a little bit, but I really felt like I was on my own. This is what I discovered when I was exploring my own birth experience. So then I said to my mum, well, what happened to me after I was born? And she said, well, I was still super tired. She said, I don't really remember the birth. She said, but I do remember waking up and seeing you and holding you. And I went, how long? And she went, oh, must have been about a minute, 2 minutes, she said. And then I was just too tired. And they took you away and put you in the nursery for 5 or 6 hours.
Well, that was part of the generational,
absolutely
thing as well. I mean, because I was born in the Lake District, and I know the midwives at the time were just ignore the baby if the baby's crying. That was part of the generation. Yep. That was what they were taught. And the whole skin on skin bonding stuff was not it was not knowledge then. So. No.
But the interesting thing is when I went back into the Matrix and to check in with my baby self after birth, in that nursery, I could very clearly see the scene of not only my baby self in the little crib thing, but also all the other babies that were in there, and they were all crying. right? They were all desperately crying, wanting their mum. And my baby self was trying to get out to go and help those babies.
Right.
Yeah. So I realized in that moment and witnessing my baby self trying to go and soothe those babies, because she was also feeling her own separation. She thought that mum didn't want her. She didn't, babies have no concept of time, so she doesn't know how long she's going to be there. But what she really knows is that this noise and this environment is upsetting her too, because everybody's now crying. So I realized in that moment that, oh my God, this is why I have such passion to help people heal from their birth traumas, especially the separation after birth. And also why I love to work with pregnant women to help them achieve a natural birth and to keep their babies with them, because, understanding that bonding process and how important it is to kind of like, connect mother and baby in that first 45 minutes of life, realizing that I didn't have that myself. It's like, the wounded healer. We're all wounded healer. Those of us that work with people, we're all wounded healers. We normally go into the area that we know the most about. So that was obviously my setup. So like, it was all perfect. It was perfect that midwife came in and gave my mum the drugs. It was perfect that my mum went to sleep. It was perfect that my baby self spent 5 hours in the nursery on her own, having to deal with things, because I'm super Miss Independent. So, and was really not really trusting my mum very much after that experience. But when I explained to my baby self, and this is what I love about this process, you can communicate with your baby self. And I explained to her, look, mum is not, mum, it wasn't the fact that mum didn't want you. Had she been awake and had a natural birth or a different birth experience, but wasn't needing to sleep, then there's no way she would have let you go somewhere else. So I had to explain to my baby self, it's not that she didn't love you, that she didn't want you. And she really did spend the rest of her life trying to make up for that as well, unconsciously. So so my baby self kind of got it and went, yeah, I can see that, I can understand that. So literally I just scoop her up, and this is what I do with clients, is once we've healed the trauma and the baby has the cognitive understanding of what's going on, we then just them up and took her back to mum, woke mum up, put her back in mum's arms. I know I was breastfed, so breastfeeding, and that healed my, because there was always a I don't really know how to, there was always a little bit of anger towards my mum, like, you're not there for me. And I could explain that away because my mum went to work when I was young. She'd come home from work very tired and sleep on the couch. I think she suffered either from ME or she had to have a hysterectomy quite early in life, so got slammed into menopause. So she slept a lot. So I grew up with my mum being asleep a lot.
So it was
not
reminding
realizing
you
it was
on
reminding me.
subconscious level.
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting? Thank you for sharing your birth experience. Is it okay if I share mine? Because I did
Absolutely.
a wonderful, and I've actually got something to tell you. I did a wonderful session with Sharon recently around my own birth experience. And what came up was when my mum was a few months pregnant, she had a lump on her tummy. And she got told that either if she didn't have an operation, she may well die, but if she did have the operation, the baby would probably die. Well, she did have the operation, but I'm a survivor, obviously. So anyways, we did some work around this, and I have to report, I've recently got back from the UK, and I just feel that I had such a healing time with my mum. I feel that something, I can't even really put words to it, because it's not, I could say anything around it, but I just felt that something had really deeply shifted, and both mum and I feel that it was an incredibly special time. So thank you so much, Sharon.
I just love those stories. I love them, because something always shifts, and it's not always, you had no expectation. You may have had some hope, but you had no expectation that was going, you were going to have a better relationship with your mum. Neither did I. I was grateful I did healed my that part of my birth, the separation part, about a year before my mum died. So it meant for the last year I was able to be fully present with her and didn't have that energy. And because it's pre-verbal, because it happens pre-verbal, it's very hard to verbalize that energy, that feeling. Yes. It makes no sense to us, and it's hard to put into words. So so working with mothers on their birth experience with their children, quite often the children will change. I've got so many stories of children changing after the mother's gone through and healed her birth experience with the child as well. So
amazing stuff, Sharon. Would you like to talk a little bit about the future of, birth, fertility, conception? Because we're in such a changing world at the moment, and certainly this podcast is called New Earth. So, what we're moving into. So I'd love to hear your take on that from a birthing point of view.
Alrighty. So I want to just refer back to the book again for a moment. So when I was writing the book, first of all, this image came through for the cover, which is the energy of Mother Mary. And I didn't really understand the importance of that until it really came through and I really connected with her. But when I was writing this book, it was a spiritual practice for me, and I would speak to the book in meditation. All right, this book to me is kind of like my own baby. It took me 9 months to write.
Oh, how beautiful.
3 months for editing, and then it got birthed into the world. So, and I would check in every now and again and ask the book questions like, how are we doing? Is there anything that you need to change? It was like, the book isn't me, the book is its own energy, and it does its own thing, and it finds the right people when they're ready to read it. And I really tuned in one day and I said, right, what's your purpose? What are you here for? Why are you here? And the message I got back was, children in the future are not going to need to be birthed through trauma.
I love that you say that. I love that you say that, because it creates that imprint, doesn't it? And that is what part of, I believe, the new earth we're moving in. We're clearing that trauma so that we can operate through love. That's the place we're coming from, rather than trauma. So I love that you say that. So how do you see that happening, Sharon? How do you see that transition?
Okay, well, that's a really good question. How I see that happening is like, okay, so we're going through what is, I think most people who are listening to your type of podcast will fully understand when I say we're going through the Great Awakening. All right. And although I've known it for years, I didn't fully appreciate it until 3 years ago, when I started going down and really started studying the dark arts and what they're up to. So the medical profession are not taught anymore how to do natural birth experiences, right? Midwives are not taught that unless you're an independent midwife. Okay, so a hospital midwife is taught what drugs to give at what point, and the side effects, and how to do charts and blah, blah, blah. Nobody now is taught how to do breech birth delivery, twin birth delivery. So I could see all of that kind of like, okay, yes, I can understand that. And then we have the what we do to babies as soon as they're born. So in America, the little boys get circumcised, which is massive trauma creating and emotional brain damage, and just horrendous. All the medical products that go into the baby's arm, and the whole system has been set up to weaken us as humanity, whether to weaken us physically, emotionally, mentally.
And sorry to interrupt, but this feels important. And also, I'd like if you could just add to that the birth experience and how the bacteria, etc., of the natural actually helps to strengthen the immune system. That if we haven't had that, and then we're having all the vaccinations, things that you mentioned, it's further medicalizing, isn't it? So I don't know if you want to just talk about how what you gain from natural birth.
Yes. So part of our immunity. Well, so let me put it this way. We get our immunity from our mum when we're born vaginally, coming down the birth canal, coming out that way. We pick up the all the good bacteria, breastfeeding as well. The mother's immunity, the good bugs that we need for digestion is passed on to the baby during that birth experience. Now, with C-section, that doesn't happen because the baby gets pulled out through the top hatch. And so what some midwives will do now, especially the independent ones, will take a vaginal swab and put it in the baby's mouth, so the baby gets that first load of bacteria. Now, what the mother has gets passed on to the baby. So if mum has a very poor diet and a very low immune system and a lot of bad gut bacteria, that of course then gets passed on to the baby. You can't make the good bacteria out of bad bacteria.
Sure.
So it's really important for mums to eat really good probiotic food, prebiotic, probiotic, and to really, if you can, before getting pregnant, do a heavy metal detox, because everything you've got within your system is just being passed to the baby. So if mum's really in good health, she has a nice strong immune system, she has good gut bacteria, then that baby's set. It's had the best start in life, it's got the breast milk that continues with it. And I don't know whether people are actually aware, but your breast milk will change depending on what the baby needs. Because the baby needs different things. If mum's got a cold, then those antibodies are passed through the milk to the baby. It's just nature has designed it for us to have the best chance of survival if we're left to our own devices. Now, of course, there are always going to be medical emergencies because some of our bodies, our pelvis may be out of alignment and we haven't had it adjusted and things like this. So, there are genuinely only about 5% of medical emergencies, but the rest of them are created once you start going down the medical route.
Yes.
The gas and air, the pain relief, the induction, all of that. The more medical procedures you have during your birth experience, the more medicalized your birth's going to be, and that will most likely end up with either C-section or forceps being pulled out.
Yeah, thank you for that. That sounds interesting. So in terms of the shift into the new ways of being, how would you see that transition happening within the individual primarily? I would imagine that sort of self-trust and self-trust in our natural healing ability,
and our natural birthing ability as well.
Yes. Yeah.
I am so blessed to be here. I came to Thailand in March 2020 for 1 month, and then I was going on to Australia to teach workshops there. Then I was going back to the UK. Then I was going various other places, and of course the whole world shut down. So I ended up deciding to stay here. Now here we have, I have met the most incredible midwives, the most incredible doulas, and the birthing practices here in Thailand are really not good. They're like, most of them end up with C-section. Most of the women are totally left, to get on with it until they get into trouble, and then C-section. So most of the expat women here will try not to go into the hospitals to have their babies. So there's quite a big home birth movement going on here. We've got a lot of Israeli people here who are able to pop out babies a lot. So so there's a really big shift here of women helping women to give birth. And of course, yes, you go somewhere so you're close to a hospital should the midwife or the doula feel like they can't, something's going wrong, and then you get transferred to the hospital. Then the midwife and the doula is just like, you're not allowed in. Right? Once you hand over to the hospital, that's it. They're out of the picture.
Yeah.
So how I see in the future going, more and more women are being drawn to be a doula or an independent midwife outside of the medical system, obviously working with the medical system when they need to. So there's a really big one in Spain, in Orgiva as well, a really like off-grid community that live there. And Vanessa there, she teaches a lot of independent midwives.
Amazing.
And So that's how I see it shifting. We are, all of
Beautiful.
us now, most of us are shifting away from the trusting the medical professions, you know, as like, yes, if we break an arm, we need to go to a hospital and get that fixed, but we are all starting now to look more at natural remedies. So this will just continue to go on. I believe a lot of people are going to have trouble with infertility as well because of the products. So there's going to be a lot of awareness around fertility, pregnancy, and birth. And I think once we've gone over this hump of what's happening, then these communities, these people that are coming together that want a more natural life, are going to be going back to the old ways of, you know, just gentle birthing, maybe in water.
I just want to mention Nikita Stark, who is an ambassador for People's Health Alliance, which I'm an international ambassador for, because she has a business when push comes to shove, and it's all this kind of stuff that you've just been talking about, this last part. And I think her motto is "Peace on earth begins at birth." So it's really, you know, a similar concept, really, of you know, how we can move into that by healing our birth and having a good birth. So it's incredible stuff, Sharon. Are there any last comments? Anything else that you'd like to add before we finish up today?
What would I like to add? Just to reiterate, like, we are all doing the best we can with the knowledge and understanding that we have in this present moment, and what we know today will be different to what we know tomorrow. So anybody who has been triggered by listening to these stories, you know, how we come into the world really does set up patterns for our life. So by looking at those patterns, just a very quick to finish off my own birth story is like, when I'm writing my book, I would sit down, I'd allow myself 2 hours a day to write. I would sit down, I'd do a bit of procrastination, then I'd get into writing feverishly. Then all of a sudden I'd get a wave of tiredness come over me, right? And I'd have to have a little sleep. And I'm going, what is going on here? Now, when you're doing something like writing a book, giving birth to a baby, going through a big trauma in your life, all your negative beliefs become stronger, right? So I had this back chat going on in my head, going like, who are you to write a book? Nobody's going to read it. You're going to get inundated with clients. You're going to get something wrong and you're going to get into trouble. All of that stuff was building in my head, and I would shut down and go to sleep. I then realized, after talking to my mum, that what I was doing is I was reenacting my birth story.
Really interesting.
Yes. So remember, I said I was very keen to come, and I was coming out, and then all of a sudden, So once I went back and healed that for my baby self, that moment when the pethidins hit, and went through it bit by bit and healed that experience with my baby self, I could then sit down for the full 2 hours. I didn't have to procrastinate beforehand. I didn't have to have a nap in between writing. So know that if there's patterns in your life that you can't explain where they started, it's most probably goes back to either your birth, in utero, past life, or ancestral.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of this work, you know, for anyone that feels, you know, is perhaps feeling a bit guilty because they didn't set things up properly for their children or whatever. It's possible to heal it both for yourself and your kids. You know, that's the beauty of this work, is that I, you know, and I believe that, I really truly believe it, because I've seen it, you know, the transitions that are possible with this kind of work.
And it's never too late. And never too late. I've got a quick little story if we got enough time.
Absolutely.
I was doing a talk at Sylvia Hartman's conference that she does, the AMT conference, and I was doing an hour talk about a lot of the stuff that we've talked about today, but gone more into different areas. And there was this lady sat next to one of my helpers, and she was tapping away. She was an EFT person, and I knew she was safe and she was okay because she was sat next to my friend Ted. So anyway, so I didn't get to talk to her because lots of people were coming up to talk to me afterwards. But what happened the next day is, when the conference started, they were getting people up to talk a little bit about their experiences the day before. And I'd done an interview with somebody for a TV show, so I came in late. And as I walked in, Sylvia Hartman went, and there's Sharon King. And the whole audience turned around and looked at me, and I could see this woman up on the stage, and I recognized that she was the one that was tapping through my presentation. And it was just like, whoa, what's happening here? You know, a little bit shocked at everybody looking at me. And what she was saying is that she realized, so her grown-up daughter was currently living in America. They hadn't spoken for months. And even though she was emailing, texting, calling her daughter wasn't responding to her. It was just like, no, you know, want time out from you, mum. No, thank you very much. And she realized through something I said, made her think about the birth experience with her daughter and went, oh my God. And she was literally just tapping, and she was talking to her daughter in her mind going, I'm so sorry you had that experience. You know, that must have been really terrible for you. I'm really sorry that you had that. And as she's tapping around, and, you know, she started to feel better. And that evening, she showed us the text. That evening, the daughter texted her, because she'd got up, because it was like, you know, time difference. So the daughter was asleep when she was doing the tapping during our daytime. And the daughter texted her and said, I don't know what you've done today, mum, but something shifted, and thank you very much. And let's talk.
Yay. How amazing is that? That's so powerful.
So it's never too late. You can have, absolutely
shifted everything. It's powerful work, this stuff. So, you know, anyone listening, please do share, because this is the kind of stuff that we really need to get out there into the world, you know, so that people can really heal on this very deep level. So Sharon, just to finish up, how can people get in contact with you, and also buy your book if they're interested to get that?
Okay, so the book's available on Amazon. Just Google either my name, Sharon King, or Heal Your Birth, Heal Your Life, or search for that on Amazon. It's in audiobook as well as Kindle and physical book. It's translated into German, Bulgarian, Romanian, South Korean, and I'm looking a publisher for Spanish and French. So if anybody knows anybody, and maybe Italy. And my website is magicalnewbeginnings.com, and my email is sharon@magicalnewbeginnings.com.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Sharon. It's been absolutely wonderful chatting with you today. And anyone that's enjoyed this, that would like to listen to more New Earth podcasts, please do hit the subscribe button. Bye for now, everyone. Thank you for listening.